Okay.
The football party, whatever it was.
Yes, we got.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. We are here. Are we live? Okay, it just has my picture.
Interesting analogy to me.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the camera's on. Great. Terrific. Welcome everybody to the Senate Democratic Caucus. It is the 27th of February, which is just unbelievable. And we are getting close to town meeting, and we are also getting close to crossover. And so in the last couple of weeks, we're really trying to get all our senators up to date with all the important work that we're doing so that we can go to town meeting and be in town meeting week with our constituents and talk about the incredible work that's going on in this building. So today we're going to do updates from chairs about the top priority work, the most important work that's coming out of their committees in time for crossover, and so that we can chat about it at town meeting. So I see a bunch of people, and today we want to say thank you to Bobby Starr for our snacks, which are numerous. So thank you, Bobby. So why don't we start on my right? Why don't we start with Nodder? Nodder, we have a joint fiscal committee meeting going on at the same time, so we're missing some chairs. Nodder, why don't you come up so the camera can see you? Nodder, vice chair of Senate Judiciary. So the camera's there, and go for it.
All right, hi friends. I am here from Senate Judiciary, and I'll highlight a few of the most important bills that we're working on. And I know that we've all heard that bail and conditions of release have been widely discussed in the off session and before that, frankly. And we do have two bills related to bail and conditions of release, as well as hold without bail. Those are S-195 and S-196. And throughout the conversations, we've started leaning towards the fact that it's really conditions of release that are the main issue area that need to be addressed. And so we're getting into the weeds about what type of supervision, alternatives to incarceration and home detention and electronic monitoring or GPS, like the ankle bracelets, would be useful in ensuring compliance with conditions of release. It's, often we hear about enforcement of conditions of release. That does come, but usually 2 or 3 years down the road. And the issue that we're trying to address are the instances of violations as they're happening, rather than enforcement 2 or 3 years down the road. The next piece that we're working on is Proposal 4, which is the Equal Rights Amendment to include race, ethnicity, sex, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity and expression, and national origin to the Vermont Constitution. We are having more conversations about adding religion to this as well. And the next piece that we're working on is the Climate Superfund bill, and it's not every day that we get to work on climate change issues in Senate Judiciary, so I'm pretty excited about that one. In a nutshell, the plan is to create a climate superfund that will be overseen by ANR, which will have to use different formulas that are approved by the EPA to calculate past damages and future damages caused by the largest contributors to climate change, aka fossil fuel companies. And thankfully, we have other states who made mistakes in the past regarding this type of legislation. So we're able to look to them to avoid those mistakes and make sure that we're doing this properly. Another bill that we are hoping to get out, actually I think is on the floor at some point this week, is a bill that creates 3 new judge positions. At the beginning of the session, we heard that that we are addressing our backlog, but it will take between 20 to 30 years to actually get out of the judiciary backlog. So these 3 new positions, one of them will be for a statewide drug docket. The other will be a northern float position. and the other will be a statewide CHINS docket. And you may see in the language of the bill that it does not provide a description of these positions, and that's us trying to make sure we don't overstep into the all the way into the judiciary branch, because it's their job to provide the administrative rules as to what these judge positions will actually be for. But we have heard repeatedly in testimony that what I just described will be what the judge positions are for. And lastly, I'll talk about auto insurance, which is basically we're trying to close a loophole in which victims of in which victims who are eligible to receive the full amount of their underinsured motorist insurance actually receive the full amount that they are paying for, because currently folks are occasionally finding themselves in situations where they're not receiving the full amount of their policy, even though they have millions of dollars in things like medical debt. So that's another bill that I hope that we're voting out this week. So if you have any additional questions about any of these bills, I'm happy to provide you with a one-pager.
Just quickly, remind us how much money the Climate Superfund bill proposes to bring into Vermont.
That number, I don't have that number. I don't think that we can have that number until the work is actually done to form the calculations.
Got it. So it's a super fund that's infinite in our minds.
I don't know about infinite, but yeah, so.
Large. Okay, great. And I think and just remind everybody, I believe the ghost gun bill is on the floor tomorrow.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, great. Terrific. Yeah.
A very quick, basic question. How do you identify companies that you want to ask to participate in the funding the bill, and those that are not?
Yeah, so we received a few hours of testimony about that. I will say it's very complicated and heavily scientific. I did get the manuscripts from one of the I can't remember his exact department, but we did have a professor from Dartmouth who testified and provided us with many pages as to how you make those identifications. And it's very important that we stick to something that is scientific and accurate. And also, we have to make sure that they are not capricious. And that's the language that from the situation that happened in New York. So we have to avoid in order to make sure that we are using the correct formulas to identify the companies and to identify how much they've contributed to climate damage in our state. We also can't look beyond our borders either. That's the hope. Yeah.
Great. And I think we have one more question, and then I'm going to go to transportation. I'm going to go back and forth.
Thank you. This sounds terrific. And it does bring to mind that we may have other options, not just for climate change. I think what you're doing is excellent. But is there a way that you might ask of your legal experts at Dartmouth and others about a super fund for the PCB contamination that we're seeing in schools and the contributors of that? That's just a question that you probably cannot answer at this point, but it certainly would seem to me that there is an analogy to be made.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Great. I think then we're going to go back and forth each side of the room. I think we're going to go to Senator Chittenden for the transportation report.
Thank you. As many of you know, I am not the vice chair of Senate Transportation. I'm very thankful to Senator Perchlik for taking that on for me, as I've worked to balance my other full-time job, 3 kids, and a loving spouse. But I'm happy to help where I can, and Senator Perchlik asked me today to give the report on Senate Transportation. So I will say this, your Senate Transportation is functioning as a very high-functioning team. We work really well together. We're getting things out. You've already seen 3 of our bills. We get along, except for that one senator from Caledonia, Kitchell. We're working on it. All right. So you've already seen 3 of our bills. Thank you, Senator
There's a
Kennedy.
cabaret act in his future.
Got to keep it light. So you already saw S256, which had to do, we already passed that out. You voted on it. And that has to do with the listing process for DMV special plates. And we actually pulled S264 into S256. So that was sort of a combo bill just to use up less of the floor time as we would take on different topics. You did see S154, which was Make Vermont Flat Again, about the plane systems, the SOL coordinate system. You've also already seen S309, the DMV miscellaneous bill, which we really pulled content from S187, S210, and S287. In there, you saw things about the national pediatric recommendations on car safety seats, window tinting, as well as there was one other from one of those bills. Airbags was also put in. So we put a lot into the DMV miscellaneous bill, rusted rotors, and so on. So you already saw that. The one bill that we are working on now, hoping to get out this Friday that you should see, has to do with work zone safety and using technology available in today's times that our neighbors are using for different purposes. But we're really focused on automated license plate readers, specifically used as a pilot, a hopefully federally funded pilot on controlled use highways or controlled access highways. And that could be more than just Interstate 89. Think of Route 2, Route 4, state managed controlled access highways, where there was a very tragic event a couple of years ago where a flagger perished. And so this is looking at how the technology could be used to primarily calm traffic. That is our intent. It is not to generate revenue. It is not to do anything other than that. These would be issued as violations, not fees, not citations. They would not carry with them speeding ticket points. So this would really be like a parking ticket. A parking ticket, you don't know who parked it there, so the ticket's issued to the car. These violations would be issued to the vehicle, and we're currently looking at the first one being a $0 violation, and then the next one within 12 months would carry with it a fine. I think right now we have it at $60 or something like that. Can't use the word fine. Fine is a protected word, so a violation of sorts, so it's not a fine. So there's a lot of things to work through on that. We are taking testimony. Judge Zone gave us a lot of things to think about the appeals process, rental cars, ways to contest against it. So we are taking more. Connecticut has recently done something similar. We're hearing from them later this week, and I feel optimistic that your transportation committee will have something for you to vote on before crossover. And that's about all I have.
Thank you. And you have this to circulate to the caucus?
I will email this to, yes.
Great, terrific. Any questions for Tom? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're behind the.
I know, I'm behind. Senator Chittenden, the T-bill is coming over from the House. I assume we'll get it in time for crossover, obviously. But as we hear from constituents over a town meeting break or afterwards about projects that are listed in the T-bill or questions about local projects and roads, what would you recommend we do if we have questions or comments about the T-bill as it starts to come up? Because I'm already hearing from folks who want to know about timelines. How do we get that information to you as a committee so we can have our constituent concerns addressed?
Well, I don't know if I'd give any new advice, but I'd say please relay. Feel free to reply, forward on. Many of you senators do that. So when something transportation related comes up, you will reply back CCing, and I'm happy to respond there. That puts it on my radar, as well as the whole committee, so you can send it to the whole committee. So I definitely encourage you to reply back CCing me in order to free up your inbox a little bit, and I can take that ball and run with it as best I can, or the committee at large. I'll do the Donahue, if I may.
Speaking of town meeting, one of our major local topics has been the impact of the eclipse on Chittenden and Franklin counties. I don't know who else, probably everybody, but you know, we're expecting 15,000 people to try and show up at Shelburne Farms down the street from me. So, you know, I wonder if transportation can start being proactive. There's a lot of small planning meetings happening and everyone's kind of feeling like they're on their own, which I get, but you know, it's going to be a bit nutty.
That's a great point. I did hear it's going to be cloudy that day, so this might not be a big problem, but just kidding. Great point. I'll take that back and maybe we can hear from the agency. So thank you for that.
No.
Oh, So I will say, I will take that back to the committee and we will raise it to the secretary or the agency of transportation and hear what they're thinking about regarding transportation management during that time when we'll have a lot of out-of-staters using our roads.
Terrific, thank you. Great point. Okay, we're going to go to Senate Government Ops, and then we'll go into natural resources, to human wealth, health and welfare, and then to institutions. How about that? And then to education and economic development.
Okay, thank you, Senator Clarkson. Okay, Senate Government Operations. We hope to pass a constitutional amendment tomorrow. That's top of list. Second, S55, as you heard on the floor this morning, we're working on a open meeting law sort of revamp post-COVID. During COVID, we had we allowed public bodies, and public bodies are all state and local and regional bodies that are public, like our school boards, our state board of education, all of the advisory boards you can think of, our select boards, our planning commissions, our CUDs. There are a whole bunch of them, and they're at the state, local, and regional level in Vermont. And during the pandemic, we allowed them to meet fully remotely without having a physical location. We allowed them to do some shortcuts because of the pandemic. That we extended now twice. The past two Act 1s have been about this. So now we are doing a permanent revamp of open meeting law. And this is one of those bills I know you're all familiar with that has gone around the block and back. And so we've had a lot of versions of it, but where we're at now, and we hope to vote it out probably tomorrow afternoon, is that all state public bodies would have to meet in hybrid form if they are a public body that has legislative, quasi-judicial, or budget and finance authority. So anything that it does not have those four things is considered an advisory body. And the vast majority of public bodies are actually advisory bodies. So all the advisory bodies would be able to meet in fully remote, fully in person, or hybrid format. So that is the vast majority at the state and the local level. Most boards are advisory. They don't control taxes. They don't control finance and budget. They don't have quasi-judicial powers, and they don't make laws or policy. So think about all the committees of all the boards too that are advising the full board. Those are public bodies, but they're advisory. So that's an important distinction. But at the state level, if you have those four powers, you have to meet in hybrid form, and you have to post a video of that meeting on your website. If they have legislative, quasi-judicial, tax, or budgetary authority. So State Board of Education, the famous Fish and Wildlife Board, all select boards, all school boards, the boards of civil authority, but they're at the local level. So at the state level, all those that have those four powers have to meet remotely. At the local level, or have to be hybrid. I mean, at the local level, we got a lot of pushback, and I'm sure you guys got some emails too, a lot of pushback on requiring the local boards to meet in hybrid. So we backed off on the hybrid for the local boards. The advisory boards at the local level are just like advisory boards at the state level. They can meet in either of the three formats. But the local boards that have those four powers, or any of those four powers, legislative, quasi-judicial, budget, or finance, or taxation, have to meet the way it was before COVID. So they either have to meet fully in person, or they can meet remotely as long as they have a designated physical location. So a place where somebody can go and participate in the meeting in public, in person. And one of the reasons is we got testimony from towns that don't have internet access. They still don't. We got testimony from Guildhall, for example. They don't have the bandwidth to have fully remote meetings. or to have people participate in hybrid fashion. So there needs to be a physical location for those boards for people to participate in them, for members of the public to be able to go and see the board, and for, frankly, members of the board itself. They may not also literally have the bandwidth to do it. We also put in a provision, though, that allows a member of the public, and we're still working on the details of this, or a member of, I think we're going to add member of the press, to make a request to have either electronic access or in-person access if one of those one of the boards is meeting fully remotely or fully in person. So if your energy committee is meeting fully remotely, and somebody from the town really wants to go to the energy committee meeting, but they don't have internet access, they can ask the energy committee to meet to give them in-person access. And one of the reasons we're putting this in is because people with disabilities, we have testimony from people with disabilities that either they can't often come in person, so they want to have the remote access, or there are people who don't have internet who can't come remotely. So we're trying to put in a way to accommodate or to provide access to people who can't make it. So we're still working out. There's also a study committee that's chaired by the Secretary of State that works on further issues that we haven't yet fully resolved. So that's S55. Happy to answer questions individually or now.
So,
Here, Brian, hold on, please.
so you and I chatted a little bit about this in chairs, but what were folks doing during COVID that, again, don't have internet now? I'm just curious.
So a lot of the people during COVID were not able to participate in their meetings if they didn't have good
I see,
internet.
but the meetings themselves were held virtually or
Right.
likely not held virtually. They were just held in person, old school.
Yeah, I mean, every board made its own decision. Some of them met fully remotely. Some still met in person. And in fact, the VLCT did a survey that we got the preliminary results from. The majority, the biggest chunk of towns are actually meeting in hybrid fashion right now. And then the second biggest is meeting all in person. There are very few towns whose select boards are meeting fully remotely anymore. But during the pandemic, a lot of them did. And I think it did cut down on access for people who didn't have internet or vice versa, couldn't be there in person. Yeah.
Quick question. So a DRB, a planning commission, how do they, I didn't quite see how they fit in the quasi-judicial or
Yeah.
not scheme.
DRBs can be quasi-judicial, so they would be considered a quasi-judicial board. Planning commissions are, I think, would be considered advisory because they are just making an advisory plan, but the select board is the one that actually approves the plan. So most things are advisory. So there's a lot of flexibility for advisory boards. So if you're getting pushback, a lot of it is, it's probably an advisory board. Did you have a question or want to add anything? Oh,
Yes.
oh,
Hi,
sorry.
thank you. Back in the very old days, we would have people come in on speakerphone. Is that even being considered in some of these towns where internet is not a factor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Telephonic access counts, and it's in the
Super.
law. And for the access, for if you're requesting access, I think we're going to add a thing that says specifically that telephonic access counts as electronic access. Yes. So that's S55. The other big bill I want to just mention is our big government response to flooding. Lots of provisions in it. I don't think any of them are really that controversial, and most of them are not that exciting except for to the GovOps committee. But that will be on the floor after break. It has to go through a couple other committees.
And we have a summary of that both on our website, and we can also send it around.
Yeah, yes,
There's a good summary.
yeah. So there you go.
So if you give it to Christopher, I think we're going to hear from our Chair of Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and then we'll go to Health and Welfare, Education, and wind up with Senate Economic Development. Oh, and institutions and ag.
So
Bobby after. Yeah. Too many.
Briefly, we have just two bills to talk about. We've talked about them at other caucuses, no surprise. So 213, the Flood Safety Act, address, I call it sometimes the 3M bill, because it starts with mapping, it moves to a whole series of meetings, and then it moves to management. So that's for river corridors, floodplains, and wetlands, as well as improving our dam safety program. That has just got referred to, came up on Friday notice, off to approps. There's a significant amount of money. It's a big investment for the long haul. And so it's, I'm not sure, my understanding is it may not be out of approach till after town meeting week break. The other bill that was just voted out last Wednesday. We're on the cusp of voting out S258, the Fish and Wildlife Board bill. So to review, as Senator Hardy was just talking about, the vast majority of boards are advisory. Fish and Wildlife Board actually is unique in having rulemaking authority. This expands the board, puts, basically, to say it the simplest way, hunters and non-hunters on the board in approximately equal numbers, and they advise on all wildlife. So not just game, but non-game as well. And then their habitats, because it's all one ecosystem out there. So they're advising on the health and welfare of all these animals that we hold in public trust together. The other piece people will recall is there was a rulemaking precipitated by 2 bills out of natural resources 2 years ago. That rule came to LCAR this fall, and LCAR made the rare step of certifying 4 objections to the Secretary of State. In essence, the legislature said, we understand the legislative intent of the bill, and these 4 provisions, which was only maybe 1% of the bill, the rule, we are certifying objections to. So we are making 4 technical corrections, proposing 4 technical corrections to Fish and Wildlife rules through the bill. And they relate to the definition of trapping. So there's no a provision that said you always have to set traps back 50 feet from the edge of a public trail, for instance, or road. There's we also had a moratorium on coyote hunting with hounds for 2 years, and this would make that permanent law. And so, I would say in sum on that piece, we're saying the Fish and Wildlife Board, in essence, told the legislature it understood our 2 bills better than we did. And they wrote rule in conflict with the legislative intent as expressed by the legislature. We're saying, as Mr. O'Grady has reminded us, we are the lawmaking, supreme lawmaking authority for the state of Vermont. We're saying, okay, the board did what it did, but we're adhering to protecting our own position of saying, we've acted on this, we've studied it, and these are the changes we're proposing. Again, which it's a very sensitive topic. There's been a lot of talk about it, but if you slow down and look at the provisions in the bill, they're actually quite technical, quite narrow, and they are in no way, shape, or form against hunting. The biggest thing I would say is Bill Doyle used to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. People who have been off the board for 30 years feel like they've been on the menu. Why are all the fish and wildlife and their habitats in the state of Vermont managed without them even having a seat at the table? So with that, that's 258.
I think given our time frame, we're going to go to Senator Lyons, then Senator Starr, Senator Campion, and then Senator Rom Hinsdale. What? We're trying to end at 1 or as close thereof, and then we also have finance and institutions here. So we're so take it away.
Okay, thank you. Jenny Lyons for Senate Health and Welfare Committee. We have already passed out the doula bill, which is a support services bill for folks who are pregnant or post-pregnancy. And that bill is now in appropriations. We look forward to having it come out on the floor for consideration by the full Senate. That is a very important bill to members of the committee. We've also just passed out S-192, which is in appropriations and should also come out on the floor. That bill determines the appropriate placement for someone with a mental health disorder or an intellectual disability when they've committed a significant crime, like murder or significant abuse of sexual abuse of children. So that bill is very important. It does deal with the placement of folks who have a mental illness or an intellectual disability into a secure forensic facility. We had to go through a lot of both the judiciary, their jurisdiction as well as our own jurisdiction. And so I did present the bill to judiciary this morning, and it looks like it will be going forward. One of the more important pieces of that bill is to allow for victims and their families to understand when someone is committed to the care of the Commissioner of Mental Health or committed to the care of the Commissioner of Dale, Department of Aging and Independent Living, but also then the placement within a secure facility. It's not an easy bill to deal with, but because we did work on it all summer with the Act 27 working group. You may be hearing from your constituents, especially those who have children with disabilities. And if you have specific questions about the bill, I actually suggest you wait until the bill has been presented on the floor, and the details will be probably easier to understand, but I'm happy to help with that, as are other members of the committee, I would think. We're also looking at, we have a number of bills that we think are critically important. One in particular is a bill that we have not finished working on, and we will work on a little bit this week, and then certainly we will work on it when we get back after town meeting. And that is the AHEAD program for moving our healthcare reform payment per member per month, if you will, but to improve primary care, to work on global budgets for hospitals, and bringing folks together to move ahead, that's the name of it, with the federal government and to look for resources. Now, the importance of the work that we're doing is to provide initiatives, to provide stimulus, to encourage our Agency of Human Services and our Green Mountain Care Board to move ahead and to have negotiating principles once they start working with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It will not look like a big bill, but it is important to us. And finally, I'll mention one other because I know our time is short. There are others, but we are looking also at a prescription drug advisory board, and to begin to look at how can we control the prices of these prescription drugs. I mean, it's just outstanding what it's doing to insurance companies, hospitals, and all of us from our pockets. So that bill will cost some money. It's going to take us time, and we're being creative about how to find resources to fund this board that will more than likely be situated in the Green Mountain Care Board. I won't present others, but certainly one that I know that everybody is fascinated and interested in, and that's the overdose protection sites. That is in H72. That bill came to us early in the session, and our committee will take it up and we will work on it because I do know how critically important it is to folks who need a safe place to be when they need to inject themselves or to be safe from having overdose. So I will leave it at that. And there are other bills, of course, that you'll see gradually.
Real quick question. One of the things I think. Oh, thanks. We've talked a lot about healthcare costs going up, and is there anything being addressed this year? And you may have mentioned it, and if so, I apologize. To address the cost of healthcare.
Costs?
Yeah.
Yes, that's embedded within the AHEAD model.
The AHEAD model. That's what I wondered. Okay.
It's one of the things that's happening right now outside of the legislature is work done from Act 167, which was our big healthcare reform bill 2 sessions ago. And so we're meeting with folks about that. That includes global budgeting. It includes primary care work and increasing access to primary care. It also includes access to community services so we can have a continuum of care. There's a lot of work going on right now, and the AHEAD model is a separate but equal and supplemental or comparable legislative activity.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think we'll go until we can at least briefly get to everybody, because committees are starting a little late. So I'm hoping we'll go not too much after 5 after 1. Senator Starr, Agriculture, then Senator Campion, Senator Hinsdale, and Institutions, and then Mark for Finance if we have.
Yeah, quickly, S-272, second gen rodenticides. We took a lot of testimony on that. And it's a Class A and a Class B type pesticides. And there's only 6 in the Class B that really deal with this. So we're going to give the Agency of Ag the authority to move that into those 6 into Class A. And then anyone that would be able to purchase those would have to have an applicator's license. 301, we're going to add that 272 right to 301. 301 is a miscellaneous ag bill, which takes in the housekeeping stuff from the ag agency. And that's pretty straightforward. No big issues in that. But we've added a clause into 301 that the VITA organization, they want to be able to loan money to the forestry industry, which we all know is in pretty rough shape. And the forestry people would like to be able to access some of that low interest money. So that's really a housekeeping bill for VITA. So we added it onto the 301 as well. And we've also sent Jenny's committee, Health and Welfare. They have a Bill S-197, which includes two sections, 6 and 7, and dealing with PFABs. And I don't know how many meetings and hours we've spent from taking testimony from witnesses. And by all rights, the federal government and the state government already has authority to address those issues. So we've been working with Health and Welfare in regards to that. So that's about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Given our time.
Yep. I'll just be. Sure, absolutely. Where is the camera? Great, great. But you want me to face out this way? Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so these are topics that I've talked about already, but happy to just bring everyone back to some of our primary work around literacy, career technical education, libraries. We do have a big miscellaneous education bill coming out as well that we'll work on after crossover. And I'm happy to talk to people about that on the Tuesday that we return. But that's really the large bulk of our work. Excuse me. The only thing that's become a little controversial so far is firearms and libraries. And the bill as it was sent to us looked at some firearm regulations in libraries. What we ended up doing was Senator Hashim talked to Senator Sears about it, and it looks like that's going to be dealt with up in House Judiciary, since they are looking at firearm regulations in sensitive areas in the state. So I'll leave it there. I see Senator Hinsdale's on her way up.
I know. So cell phones isn't controversial in schools?
Yeah.
Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and my intern Zoe Moy is here, who's a CVU student. We voted our housing bill out, and we are voting tomorrow on a constitutional amendment to uphold labor rights and the right to bargain, collectively bargain, and form a union. We have asked the chamber to testify, and they have declined. So we don't have any opposition to the bill. We have the treasurer coming in to support it. It would make us the second state in the country to pass something like that. And I've just learned that Amazon and Starbucks are going right after the National Labor Relations Board, period. I mean, this is a time when labor is under attack. We just don't see it as much or pay as close attention. Tomorrow, we also hope to vote out the basic needs budget. It's an update based on Senator Clarkson and a whole task force coming up with, more principles to put in the formula so that it's more accurate. Our other three bills that we are working on with the hope of getting them through crossover are the kids code. We just took testimony from all the big names in Silicon Valley today. It was exciting. And it was, robust. I think it went well. At the end of the day, they run out of arguments and just say, we'll see you in court, so that ultimately was the bottom line. Their other solution was parents should take kids' phones away. So that was fun. And it looks like that is still moving forward. We have two smaller-ish bills that probably will become controversial at some point. One is to ensure that cash is accepted whenever you're making a retail transaction. We have to put some what am I trying to say? Some caveats in there, some exemptions, things like online transactions, et cetera, that other states have done. And Perchlik just gave us a bill that said no exemptions. So we appreciate that. And we have a bill that's largely landlord-tenant law around electric vehicle charging. So it's called a right to charge bill. And it's come to our committee because it's largely the negotiated financial relationship between the landlord and the tenant about how to ensure that can happen. And that not just being important because we're trying to tell landlords what to do. The more important piece is that renters are otherwise ineligible for any of our benefits and subsidies. And this gives them the financial nexus to be able to access those. We've heard a little bit of grumbling from housing and community development. Just probably still pass it because I like it. So that's what we're working on before crossover.
Okay, given our time, we're going to go to institutions and then to finance.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson. I can be very quick. The capital bill is what we do in institutions, as you know, and that's a 2-year bill. So what we're doing now is looking at what we did last year and seeing how it all shakes out. Stormwater and wastewater are actually in our conversations. The fairs are having trouble dealing with stormwater regulations. So I think we do need to find a way forward where we don't just exempt folks, but we find out how to compensate if they can't pay, if we don't, if we agree that they shouldn't pay. And then the other item that deals with water in many different ways is the Salisbury Fish Hatchery. So we've learned about what an important hatchery that is. It was proposed to close in 2019. Their permit goes until 2027. So there is time. So we're looking at how to handle that request of the administration to shut it down now instead of waiting, because it is a very important fish hatchery. It's the only one where we have brood stock for trout. Trout are very important in this state.
Important to our outdoor recreation.
Right.
Great. We have a question, because otherwise we're going to. Any questions? I think. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
We're going to go to. Not a question. Then we're going to go to natural. Happy working on that. We have a shared interest in the last 2 things. So thanks. And I'm chair. So we can keep our seat up.
Perfect.
We like committee space. Okay, and last but not least is finance and the vice chair, Mark McDonald.
Senator Cummings asked me to tell everybody that the Medicare bill that was supposed to take up.
Hold it up so they can hear you.
You couldn't hear me?
Online. They can't.
Okay. Senator Cummings asked me to tell everyone that the Medicare bill, which was supposed to take on Joe Namath and Jimmy Walker, is not moving. We're preempted by the feds on what we can demand, and counter advertising against the folks that push these commercials is extraordinarily expensive. The other bill we're not moving on is paying for the obesity drugs, which run a couple $100 a pill. And that's straight from the chair. We have, as everyone knows, we moved a bill that delays the vote that gives towns an opportunity to delay their vote on school funding. Two interesting facts that we picked up in the last couple of weeks. One is what is new to Vermont. The United Van Line reports that Vermont is the #1 state to move to for people with money. Highest people that have more money are coming to Vermont faster than any other state. They're leaving Massachusetts faster than any other state, along with New Jersey. And the other one was that Vermont is the highest percentage of homes are purchased with cash. People coming from buying homes with cash. So we were looking at the school budgets and funding, and we'd like to learn a little bit more about the folks that are coming with a lot of money and can afford to buy homes with cash, which is putting a big dent in our efforts for affordable housing. That's it.
Great. Thanks. And thank you. And with that, we go into town meeting week, and we will have some updates and summaries for you by the end of the week so that you can take those with you. If anybody has summaries they want to make sure we include in our summary, town meeting week summary sheet, please get them to Becca or me. That would be great. Thank you all. Have a great week. And wait a minute.
Jim Dandenau, our executive director for the Democrats, is here today. If you had anything Democratic caucus related you wanted to talk to him about. Yay. Thank you for being here, Jim.
Great. So thank you very much. We are